Let's begin with our first story. The cedi is expected to end the year a little above 7 cedis. That's according to projections by the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies captured in its 2022 economic forecast on the Ghana Cedi's outlook on the Forex market. Charles Nixon-Boa has more in this report.
This means that the Ghanaian local currency will lose about 60 pesos in value this year to the world's most important currency. According to the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies, its forecast of the end-year depreciation of the cedi to the dollar is 99% accurate. What this means is that cost of operations of businesses, particularly manufacturing, will go up. This will lead to increase in prices of some goods on the market. The center therefore warns the Bank of Ghana to supply enough forex to meet the demand of the dollar, as it appears the current forex auction strategy is not meeting the market demand for forex. This view of inadequate supply of forex, the center said, is gathered from the wide disparity that exists between the Bank of Ghana's Forex Market Code and the Interbank Market Code. Over the medium term, the center urged the state through the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade and Industry to show clear commitment in pursuing policies aimed at strengthening the local currency. In conclusion, it called for a coordinated and a balanced monetary and fiscal policy measures between the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance targeted at stabilizing the Ghana cedi.
Let's get on Zoom and interact with the Executive Director of CEFIS, Dr. Benjamin Amwam, with some more analysis. Doc, grateful that I could join us. First of all, congratulations. You almost got last year's projection of a 6.45 cedis to a dollar, right? And of course, how did you arrive by the 7.3 cedi to a dollar forecast for this year?
Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. First of all, we are quite excited that we were able to predict, not to celebrate the prediction, but then to provide a guide for businessmen and women who use the Forex for their businesses. So that is the purpose of which we do the forecast, and also to provide some form of indication to the central bank on how best to manage the currency. How did we do it? We observed the behavior of the Forex market and the supply of Forex over time. We realized that the cedi's behavior follows some pattern. And then based on the pattern and the data point that we've gathered, we then try to forecast using some forecasting tools that we have in-house to do the prediction or the forecast.
Interesting, but about 60 pesos loss based on the projection means that the economy will be much impacted. What should businesses and households do to contain the sharp fall of the cedi to the dollar this year?
For businesses, it is up to the businesses to have strategies in buying the forward ahead of time, or making their quotes ahead of time with their bankers, so they can have the Forex that they need for their transactions locked in at a price today or earlier than they will need in the future. Because if they are not able to lock in the price, then they expose themselves to the future volatility and the high price that they will have to contract for this same value of currency that they will need in the future. So the strategy is talk to your banker and then lock in a rate today for future delivery.
All right. Now, the report further expresses concern about the wide disparity that exists between the Bank of Ghana, the Forex code of the Bank of Ghana, as well as the interbank codes. How can we strike the balance in addressing this situation?
It's more of a balance of issues here. For the central bank, what they have to do is to try as much as possible to meet the requests for Forex from the banks. So if the central bank is not able to meet the request, then what happens is that these commercial banks or primary dealers will have to look for avenues to fill in the gap. And it is in looking for other sources to fill in the gap that tends to hike the price at which they get their Forex to supply. That is what then affects what we contract the dollar for on the market. So if the central bank can meet as much as they can near supply needs, not exactly because the central bank will know how to do that. If they can supply as much as they can, then the quest for the banks to fall on other suppliers on the market to fill in the gap will be reduced. Then we can have some level of equilibrium between what the Bank of Ghana quotes and what the banks will also quote to the public.
Interesting. But of course, let's turn our attention to developments in the United States, because we do know that the IMF is sounding an alarm of a sort to African economies, including Ghana, of a possibility of the economies being affected should there be some changes in the inflationary rate of the US, especially when it could impact the cost of the dollar. Subsequently, can we then project that, how best the cedi could in any way appreciate against the dollar like it happened last year for the Zambian kwacha and the Angolan kwanza?
Yeah, see, if the US is going to have some inflationary pressures, then what it means is that the inflationary pressures will be transmitted into rates that the US would like to quote for its instruments. And once the US inches up its interest rate, and what will happen is that funds will then have to move into US dollar denominated instruments. Simply means that it will be more difficult to get the dollar. And that will mean that for markets like ours, we will have to pay more to get the dollar for our transactions. So we need to watch carefully how the US will behave and its implication. If there is any rate hike in inflation, definitely there'll be compensation through interest rates, making US dollar denominated instruments more preferred, which will then affect our currency.
Interesting. But, finally, the report also highlights some macroeconomic areas such as exports and inflation. Are we looking good on these lines? Do we still have Dr. Benjamin Amwa? I'm afraid we have lost him there. But of course, we appreciate the inputs that he's, made into the outlook of the cedi on the Forex market, also assessing, the development in the United States regarding inflationary pressures. Well, Doc, I think we have him back on the line. Just before the trip, we wanted to find out the report highlighting some macroeconomic areas such as exports and inflation. Are we good? Are we looking good on these lines?
The exports, yes, we are looking good because, but for COVID, we'll have had more positive inflows from export. But then for import, we are still struggling because structurally, we have not been able to create an economy that is more domesticated. And so we tend to still consume more of our goods and services through import. And that is where our challenge, by way of controlling the cedi's value against the US dollar, becomes a problem. If only we can work towards a situation where we buy more of our inputs locally, especially through the government, because the government happens to be the largest purchaser of goods and services, then we can have some price stability for the currency.
Well, Dr. Benjamin Amwa, we're grateful that you could join us. He's Executive Director of the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies.